Hi there. Welcome to Everything Accordion, a podcast about the musical box known around the world as the accordion. My name is Ghenadie Rotari, and I will be your host on the show. On this podcast, you will hear a bit about the instrument's history, the different types of instruments of its very extended family, stories from and about accordionists, stories about contemporary music and historical works of its repertoire, discussions with colleagues from all over the world, interviews with prominent musicians, and much more. On today's episode, I have a very special guest, the first accordionist up until today that I have on the podcast that I didn't know personally, but I remember listening to some of his recordings early on when I was a student, and I was completely astonished and mesmerized by some of the works that I've heard and by the musicality and the soul put in. He is an amazing musician, a great accordionist, and innovator. He's also a professor at the Academy of Music in Oslo. He also teaches at the Royal Danish Academy of Music in Copenhagen. And it's my great pleasure to have Andreas Borregaard today on the podcast. Hi, Andreas. How are you doing? And thanks for being here.
Hi, and thank you very much for having me on the show. I'm very pleased to join in, and thanks for your very kind introduction.
The pleasure is all mine. Everything I've said in the introduction is all true. I remember looking for an accordionist who did something that was different from what I've heard up until that point, which, being born and raised in one of the ex-Soviet Union countries, you would have the kind of repertoire that was in fashion about 50, 60 years ago. So when I've heard it, completely blew me away at that point. So yeah, I would like to ask you, how did you start and why the accordion? How did this journey happen?
Well, yeah, that's of course a good question. It's completely a coincidence, really. I grew up in Denmark, in a sort of suburb town to Copenhagen called Allerød, and in that area, or in that city, there was this local music school where there was a very good and very sort of industrious teacher of the accordion. He devoted his life to develop the instrument in the classical music world, and especially focusing on making it possible for kids to start playing with free bass from a very early age, and introducing contemporary music to us music school kids when we were just very young. So what happened was that there was a lot of kids playing the accordion. Well, not a lot as in pianists or guitarists, but I guess compared to other parts of the country. So in my kindergarten, this girl had started playing, and one afternoon when I was I was at her place, I got to try the instrument that she had just got from the music school, like this tiny little kid's box. And I don't remember, maybe I was, they pointed on which buttons I should press to play the first three notes of some random kid's tune. And I don't know, I thought that was fun. So a bit later, when my parents suggested me and my older brother that, why didn't we start playing some music, or if we wanted to play an instrument, then I immediately said, well, I'd like to play the accordion. And so it happened. So I was like, a bit more than 5 years, five and a half, I guess. That's okay. Important when you're 5. It's not important now, but at that time, it was important. 5.5.
Yeah, it's one of those, moments of decisions. Like, it's not 5 years, it's a little bit more, like I was more mature at 5.5.
Yeah. Wow. So that's it, basically.
No, basically, like that's quite a story. I mean, having a friend introduce you to, or whoever introduced you at that age to the instrument, in my case, we didn't have free spaces in the piano class at the music school. So that's how I ended up playing accordion.
Yeah.
It's one of those things that you think back and you're like, was it meant to be, or was it's just a whole big mistake that I'm here? But
Well, I'm sure it's not a mistake that you're here, but yeah, it's I mean, it's just so many coincidences and chances, and you know, she could have just as well not started the accordion, or maybe if my parents had asked me later and I had encountered, what do I know, a saxophone in the meantime, then maybe I would have said, I want to play the saxophone. But I feel lucky today that it didn't happen, and it was the accordion that I sort of got drawn to at that point.
Mm-hmm. And did you feel immediately that that's something with your wisdom at 5.5 that you wanted to do in your life? Or there was another dream? And at what point did the accordion become your career choice?
Very, very late, I would say. I'm a late bloomer. I was very much in doubt. And I think basically it was, you know, I handed in my application for the Academy of Music in Copenhagen on the day of the deadline. Back then it was physical paper mail.
Oh yeah, right.
Put it in the mailbox of the Academy. No, I was very hesitant to pursue a musical career. It's probably especially because it wasn't very clear to me, you know, what could it become as an accordionist, right? And yeah, and I had a lot of fun doing other stuff as well. For instance, in high school, I was fond of math and chemistry and lots of other subjects. It's not like I was this only music type of person, but at the same time, I was very interested in playing the accordion, and I kind of realized that I was talented somehow. So the thought had sort of struck me: should this be something should I apply for the big scary academy? But then, you know, the other. I don't know if that's the angel or the devil on my shoulder, but the other one at least would then say, "Oh, but think about, you know, what's your work life going to be in the future, and you know, what is your ambition? Do you want to, you know, are you going to make any money? Are you going to be able to make a career out of it, and all these things?" Yeah, and then I think I started taking some private lessons with James Crabb. Already before I applied. Luckily, he came a couple of times to the local music school where I grew up to give a masterclass. Because the old music teacher at the music school was good friends with Mogens Ellegaard. Or I should say it in Danish, Mogens Ellegaard. So
that's useful because I always had Mogens Ellegaard, so like pronouncing all of the letters.
I know, but this the guard is actually just go, so it's a bit boring.
No, that's a very interesting thing for me to learn. So I learned something today.
Yeah, and it even means farm, I can tell you.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. Anyway, so there was this link to the Academy in Copenhagen from the music school. Mogens had also been up and done a couple of masterclasses, and then James came up and did it, and he was very kind to sort of suggest that, you know, if I wanted to have another lesson, I could call him, and yeah, and then I kind of started taking lessons every now and again with him, which also helped sort of lead my thoughts into whether I should apply or not. But yeah, it was. I don't think actually it wasn't till, you know, halfway through my undergrads that I felt, okay, this is what I'm doing.
Sure.
I even, you know, I took some courses in something completely different at the university as well at some point. I just really was very ambivalent about it.
Do you think it's because I've been talking to some of the colleagues, and I think like with the accordion, we are talking about when you applied, it was, which year was it? 2000 something? Okay.
2001 I started.
Okay. Because in 2001, I think I started playing accordion in 2001. And
Yeah.
it was that moment when we didn't have anyone, like any place in the piano class. But anyway, I think, with accordion, it's also the fact that we've seen a great increase in accordionists who become concert performers over the past, I think, 10 years at most, because before that, we didn't have, like, there were these role models, which were more like legends and myths, which were there. And they were kind of the pillars of our accordion world, but they were those like 5, 6, 10 people that you knew. And perhaps this sense of inability to reach those pillars and legends, perhaps that was a little bit demotivating. And perhaps also the fact that, I don't know about the Royal Danish Academy of Music, but overall I see a tendency of not talking about what kind of career options are there for musicians, also because it's a very versatile career path. Even if you choose to be a concert performer, you can also teach, you can also do recordings for whatever, television shows, but somehow we're indoctrinated to be only that concert performer that goes and plays thousands of concerts. What do you think about this?
Well, I think it's probably partly true. Certainly, there was not a lot of sort of obvious role models when I was considering to go the music way or not. I mean, there was the two professors in Copenhagen at the time, James Crabb, who I started with, and Guy Draugsvold, who is now the professor. And I mean, I remember thinking, well, at least there are two people who can manage. At least they do it. They make it work. They have a concert career. They sort of establish families. They have a life. Maybe I had no idea how busy they were, or what kind of how they put their life and careers together. But there was this, I think if that wasn't clear to me that they were actually performing, then I probably wouldn't have applied, I think. So the fact that, as you say, that now there is probably also with the revolution of internet and and social media, there's so much more exposure to the variety of possibilities with everything basically, but especially of course with the accordion. And also, even though the instrument 20 years ago was already established in the classical music scene, it's still not very old in that sense. In Copenhagen, it didn't start at the academy till 1970, I think.
Okay.
And I think the last 20 years has also improved that a lot. The instrument has been just flourishing in new music, but also in various times in more popular music. There's been the tango revolution in a way, and it seems like a lot of performers are doing a lot of different things rather than being sort of pursuing the more classical or contemporary classical only direction, playing all the scores that we know from the last 50 years.
Yeah.
So yeah, I'm if that's the feeling that you've had when you started, then I think that's a super positive development, and hopefully the community will grow. And I think it's fantastic that you make this podcast as well to just share the information and bring us all together somehow, right? We haven't met before, but now we meet online, unfortunately, but I'm sure we'll meet in person at some point. And it's just, the more we know about what's happening, the more inspired we all become, and the more accordion.
Yeah. Well, that's why it's called Everything Accordion. I mean, the entire idea of this podcast was, I was like, during the pandemic, I looked around and I saw so many great colleagues that were doing super interesting stuff, but nobody kind of knows about it until you maybe talk or kind of interact with them. You have quarter tone experimentations, you have something that you are doing with your research at in Oslo, which we will talk about briefly. And there's really lots and lots and lots and lots happening. And unless you actually go and search the information, which you cannot always find, but it's also really great to hear from the person, him or herself, about these experiences, about what their interests are. And I find it really personal and really personal feeling and touch when you actually get to know the why behind an accordionist. Like, how did they start? Why did they start? Why do they keep on going? Because it's not, I wouldn't imagine many people coming into a music school like I have here in Austria and they choose immediately accordion. They would go piano, drum set, whatever, marimbas, because it's fun to kick stuff around. And but not the accordion. So it's always really interesting for me. So you applied to the Royal Danish Academy of Music, you did your bachelor's, you did your master's, and then you continued. You also did, I think, postgraduate, right?
Yeah, I did it's called the soloist class, but it is this postgraduate performance degree.
Okay, which is kind of like this concert examen that we have in Germany.
I guess so. And that's normally 2 years. And then after 1 year, I went to London for a year. So I took a leave from Copenhagen.
Okay.
And I went to London to study at the Guildhall School of Music and Drama. And then I got back, took the second year of the 2-year thing in Copenhagen. And then you finish that off with this concert examen kind of thing. Yeah.
Now you're also enrolled in a PhD program, which is really not that common among accordionists. I think there are really not that many institutions that offer such a degree for accordionists. I know there's one in Toronto, in Canada. There's one in Helsinki, which is very competitive, and it's really almost impossible to get in. I think it's something the Royal Academy of Music in London, but with the Brexit and all, it's a little bit tricky to get inside and actually stay inside. And would you like to talk a bit about this? Why did you choose to go on and do a PhD, and about your research?
Of course, yeah. Well, the thing is, in the program in Norway, the PhD in artistic research is, maybe it's rare that you can do it with the accordion, but I guess in recent years, more and more institutions across the world offer PhDs in artistic research. Not, let's say, just in, I don't mean just, but when in the podcast people can't see, I'm doing this with my fingers.
Quote unquote. Just.
Yes, exactly. Yeah. No, but I mean, but it's not a scientific degree, but one that focuses on, it's like a practice-based research. And you can do this a number of places in Europe and as you say, probably also in the States and Canada. The Norwegian program still is rather unique in the way that it focuses tremendously on the artistic practice as the very core of the work. So that means that the research, it is the artistic creation or the artistic work that is, the research, and it's the artistic result that is what you produce. It's not actually, there is no, at least on the Music Academy in Oslo, there is no official requirements of writing anything. Like, you don't have to write a thesis in text. You have to deliver a significant artistic result. And of course, then you have to deliver a critical reflection in which you unfold your process and you sort of make it possible for other people to understand what is it that you know, what kind of knowledge did you get to through this artistic work. Okay. But you don't have to write. You could make a podcast, or you could make a film, or you could make a dance, or you could even make, the opportunities are endless. But obviously, since you have to discuss this with a panel and an assessment committee afterwards, most people, I think, including myself, is going to produce something in writing. So this
Okay.
was maybe a long talk, but just to say that that's sort of the framework of the Norwegian program, and it's only in recent years that it's been turned into an official PhD. But they've had these types of 3-year research fellowships
Mm-hmm.
for
Okay.
I think 15 years, and
Oh.
in all the art forms
Mm-hmm.
except maybe writing, like fictional writing.
Okay.
But actors, dance, film, visual arts, music, all this, you could apply for these 3 years. And I did apply a couple of times, back in 2014 and 16, I think, but I didn't get in.
Mm-hmm.
And the reason I applied is that you get 3 years to develop and work with your own project, and it's a paid position. So that's very
Okay. Mm-hmm.
it's very fantastic, actually.
Yeah, it is.
Anyway, I didn't get
because-
in, and then I was like, "Wow, okay, maybe that's not for me." I sort of forgot about it. But then I got the job as teaching. It's called the university lecturer, actually.
Mhm.
This teaching position. And my department leader was like, "Yeah, I remember you applied. That was a pity you didn't get in, and that was a very interesting project, and yada yada." And not yada. He was honest about it, and I thought, well, maybe I should just try and apply again, because now I'm
From
here.
the
And,
inside. You're like-
well, yeah, there really isn't no insiding there, but I learned, because I didn't. Just the fact that I was encouraged somehow by his remark, and I thought, well, now it's also turning into an official PhD. I'll give it another shot. The reason why I stopped applying before was also that I already sort of realized the projects that I wanted to include at that time, and I thought, well,
Okay.
I've now done the project that I wanted to do, and what's the point?
Yeah, I understand.
But then I kind of flipped the pile around, and I started really contemplating what kind of project could I put together to apply for this new one, and then I was super lucky to get in.
Congratulations. Oh, that's
thanks a
really
lot.
amazing, because I think not many know in general, I'm not talking about accordionists, but in general about artists, about this program, because I applied in Helsinki twice and I didn't get in.
Yeah.
I applied once to Toronto, but then for some reason, I think some timetable clashes, I didn't go for the audition. So automatically I didn't get in. And then I applied once again, and then the pandemic hit. So,
Okay, yeah.
But yeah, I was really not sure about moving to Canada because it's a very big step, going to a completely different continent where you don't know anyone and you don't have any sort of sphere of contacts there. So it's, again, starting from zero, going there for 5 years.
5 years? Oh my God.
Yeah, it's, if I'm not mistaken, it's a 5 years program, same as in Helsinki. I might be mistaken, but it was a very long period. So
Sure.
that's kind of something that put me off, because I thought being away from, because being in the where I'm based, in the middle, like the center of Europe, it's very easy to move around.
Yeah.
Place. So leaving this place for 4 years would mean losing a lot of connections and networking, and so I had to consider quite a lot. And then in the end, I got a job at the music school. I did some of my projects. Pandemic hit, and here we are talking about all of this in the podcast. Long story short. Andreas, what is your research?
Yes. Well, my project's called Just Do It, Exploring the Musician's Use of Bodily Performance. It's still a working title. I might have to change it because of the content, or maybe Nike will sue me if I don't.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking. If they see your dissertation, we're gonna be like, wait a second.
Yeah, exactly.
Body movement, that's us.
Yeah, maybe I can get a sponsorship. Who knows?
You could try.
No, but it is a sort of, in brief description, it's an exploration of the challenges that we meet as instrumental performers or instrumentalists, having studied in both of your, in my case, accordion for a row of years. What happens when we suddenly have to do other things than playing the instrument? Things that we have not studied, things that are not part of a standard, academy or university curriculum, things that are in the realm of like cross aesthetics and leaning into theater or dance or performance art. This whole, let's say, area also labeled the new discipline. And yeah, so I'm trying to basically figure out what does that mean? What kind of skills do you need to engage with this new type of extra musical performance? What can we learn from the art forms that have been dealing with the body on stage for centuries, such as, of course, acting and dancing and all this? Are there anything from their methodologies that connect with the methods that we have as musicians and instrumentalists? What kinds of the expertise that we already have, how can that be expanded or augmented into the extra musical realm? Because the point is not that we should all now also study acting and dancing and be all of these things at the same time.
Yeah.
It's from the musician's viewpoint, and trying to both really detailed and rigorously explain how do you deal with this? What is it? What are the challenges? How does it feel on your body that you suddenly have to perform without the instrument that you're used to performing with? And then also very practical stuff like what is it that hinders you in the practice room? What really is difficult? And of course, more philosophical, or let's say, sort of more broadly aesthetic considerations, and trying to contextualize this type of performance in theoretical discourse from perhaps performance art or embodied cognition and philosophy.
Wow, no, that's a really great topic, and I think it's something that if you talk to people from all areas, you can go on for hours and days and months discussing these things. Yeah. Because what I find really interesting, and the way that it's not something that our teachers or professors now, hopefully it's starting a little bit more with the new generations, talking about how we use the body, because we are like, our first instrument is our body, and that's the instrument that we use. Well, we don't use, but how can I put it? Again, here's the question of who's in the driver's seat. Is it us? Is it our mind? Is it the body? Like, who is in charge? Who is controlling? And again, how do we address the physicality of actually, sitting there and using all of those hundreds of muscles in micro movements, so as not to get, like, it's a huge, complicated, complex machine that we are using. I don't like the word using. We need to find another word. But we are.
That we are.
Exactly. And that we are applying towards doing an action like playing a musical instrument and bringing it on stage. So yeah, and as part of your research process, I guess that's when it happened, but you also collaborated with some composers like Simon Stein Andersen, Jennifer Walsh. I've also listened to your recent performance for the Borealis Festival, which was amazing. And I also listened to the interview that you did with I think it was the artistic director and the composers.
And the composers. Yeah.
And one thing struck me, which before we move towards the composers, you were saying, I really loved both pieces, but I found so personal the piece, if I'm not wrong, it's called, my favorite piece is the Goldberg Variations, because to me that was the closest thing you might have to a musical autobiography ever. And the second thing for the listeners, Andreas, is there some way to see it again? Is it still online, or is it away?
No, you can, as of yet, I have it on my Vimeo page.
Oh, okay. So,
and I'm just going to embed it in my website as well. So I haven't completely cleared that with the publisher of the sheet, like of the
Okay.
piece as such, but I don't know, maybe it'll be off, but at the moment it's on. So
Well,
go and watch it, everybody.
Yeah, listeners, go on to Andreas's Vimeo page and listen to the work. It's amazing, and his performance is incredible, and it's something that you I think up until now you will never see an accordionist do before and now. So it's really great. Go and see it. And something that I found really amazing, what you said about dissociating yourself, right? Because when you are on stage and you are engaged in performing, playing the instrument, also reciting something, like where are you in there? So kind of dissociating yourself from all of the physicality. And I don't know, probably it's because we are used to kind of address ourselves as two separate entities, like the body and the mind. Yeah.
Well, that's a good old tradition back from, I guess, Descartes. The separation of body and mind, and lots of more recent both philosophy but also like neuroscience have kind of proven that you cannot, obviously, and of course, and if you think about it, yeah, it's crazy to try, but you can't separate body and mind, of course. So also people start talk about the body mind, because it is one thing, and without us having to go down that alley, if you also just, which I've done a couple of times lately, and it's never ceases to amaze me, think about how little that we actually are aware. I mean, our conscience, how little we know about what's happening within us and around us. Like it's sort of 5% of our brain activity, which is the conscious part. And then it just leaves us in a place where it feels kind of absurd to think that we are controlling very much. But anyway, that's fascinating. Talk about that another time. In terms
on
of
a different podcast.
On a different podcast called Neuroscience Everything. In terms of performing, I think what I aimed at specifically in that interview, because it was mainly related to my favorite piece, is the Goldberg Variations, was speaking the text, without revealing too much, because this is also sort of in the program note of the piece. All the words in the text are directly taken from interviews with my mum. Not interviews that I made, but interviews that the author of the sort of libretto, you can say, Ted Huffman, did with my mother. So I'm essentially speaking the words of my mum. And in the beginning, when I got the text and I started to, read it and learn it, it was very easily done that I would emotionally, of course, sort of relate to it. And I remember that time and time again on the workshops we had, the composer and the writer and me, which was also on Zoom, unfortunately, what Ted kept saying to me was that, don't emote, don't engage with the content of the text in that sense, keep the distance to it. Which is pretty...
It's really hard to do because it's your mom and it's you.
It's very hard. It's my mom's word, and especially, there's this movement about my father's death, which is, of course, like just going straight into my heart every time I read it. So I really had to work quite technically on establishing that distance, which had to do very much by keeping a strong support in the diaphragm and sort of keeping a long phrasing in the text, and keeping like a level of energy which is quite high and far away from the more, let's say, film acting intimacy, where you can you speak exactly what you feel. Then this was much more distancing myself from what I would feel in the text and then telling it as this kind of storyteller. So that became the character of the piece that we sort of landed on, that it's a storytelling piece. It's like I'm the troubadour and I'm kind of telling this story to an audience, but I just happen to use the words of the person in question here.
Yeah, it really felt like you were telling a story, and I was really impressed by how you managed to keep focused, and at the same time, as you were saying, this longer phrases, but I didn't lose myself there. I was really with you all the time while you were telling this story. So
nice.
really, congratulations on that. I think
Thank you very much.
Your goal was achieved fully. So yeah, and these are the two pieces which on which you collaborated as part of your research. And we like to talk about Jennifer Walsh's piece and also the asthma.
Sure. So those two are actually not part of the PhD.
Okay. So I understood everything. Okay, cancel.
No, it's fine. It does, but they very much led up to the PhD. The two pieces by Jennifer Walsh and Simon Steen Andersen, they were actually a result of the project I applied with previously to the Norwegian program, but didn't get in. And then I thought, like, okay, what the heck? I really want to do this project anyway, and now I have the connection with the composers. I'm just gonna establish the project as a concert project. So I did the project, which I've called Solo Act, in lack of a better name, but it's very much what it is. It was 3 commissioned pieces. Jennifer Walsh, the piece is called Self-Care. Simon Steen Andersen, Asthma, that you mentioned, and then another Danish composer, Niels Rønsholt, who wrote a piece called Until Nothing Left. And so I combined these 3 pieces, either all 3 of them in a sort of longer concert of 2 halves, or 2 of them into a 1-set concert. And I think, had it not been particularly, maybe all of them, but I remember especially one of the workshops I had with Jennifer Walsh, rehearsing her piece before the premiere. After that, I was like, something clicked, something fell in place in my brain with this whole performative music, and I thought, this is really interesting. There are so many similarities to how I would work with the music alone, like playing Berio or whatever, and to how I would use my body on stage. And at that time, it was basically thinking of, I wouldn't say simple thing, but fundamental things like tension and timing, building up tension and the release of it, impulses to react on, ways of keeping energy, ways of sort of reaching the end or the towards the next section, combining things without dropping the flow, all these things. I sort of realized this is, at least in that case, this is the same way of working, and I was kind of thrilled, and I thought, this is something I want to explore more. And then when I decided to apply for the PhD, this was the obvious choice to go really in depth. That.
For the listeners who don't know Jennifer Walsh's piece, it's very physical. Like, I think, Andreas, you had to learn some yoga positions for the piece.
Yes.
So for all the accordionists who would like to give it a shot, you might need some time to go to a yoga class before.
Yes.
But also check it out. I think it's also on your channel, right?
Yeah, and it's on YouTube on Jennifer Walsh's channel, and but I've embedded it on my website as well. So
perfect. So head on, and you'll see really amazing things, which I don't know any other accordionist that does that, like at this moment. Maybe but I haven't seen anybody yet. I've been interested in the use, well, mainly of the voice and recitation, kind of having a role while performing. So this piece was born in collaboration with Matthew Shlomowitz, this Australian UK composer. Wrote a piece which unfortunately still didn't get premiered because of various reasons, venues, people who didn't want to program it, pandemic, but hopefully we'll make now a video of it here in Austria. So I'm really looking forward to that.
Sure,
and
me too.
Again, it's kind of like it's this lecture in which you kind of need to have different roles. In one role, you need to be this serious person that performs, shows things on the accordion, but also delivers this lecture without getting lost, and also this tension, energy there, which is where I found it really difficult also because like normal songs, I would see accordionists from my home country.
Yeah.
Like they would play whatever super crazy things, and they would also sing at the same time. They might not be able to read music from a sheet, but they do all of these things, and I'm amazed because like hard as I may try, I need really time to sit and practice and kind of understand what goes where. Like when do I start with the breathing, the voice, the words, and the music. So it's really a completely different process for us classically trained musicians.
Yeah, and I think also there's the well, there's two sides to it, because one thing could be, but I'm not sure. One thing could be that the type of playing and singing that you mentioned, it's I guess it's not uncommon that the music is accompanying the song, so that they are really sort of linked together on a fundamental musical structure somewhere. Whereas when you have to recite something, when you have to sort of deliver a text and play something completely different at the same time, that's where the multitasking kicks in, which is really just a good old-fashioned mindfuck. You know, it's so difficult. And I found, and that's maybe where the classical training sort of reveals itself somehow. At least in my case, I've always been encouraged to, or let's say forced to, or that it's sort of my way of working now as well. And what I'm sure my students will tell you likewise, that I want to combine the sound with a singing voice always, you know, really grounded in how I would sing the sound and how I would shape that. So when I play the accordion, my aim is, it doesn't always succeed all the time, but you know, try to really connect with my own vocal, let's say, ability somehow. But that means that my diaphragm is already in a way occupied by making my accordion sound, and then having to speak something else with the same diaphragm is kind of, you know, there's really a conflict there. Yeah,
because like in my mind, you need to automate something.
You know, absolutely, right? Absolutely.
Because you cannot. I think it was my professor Corrado Royes from Trieste who said, like, our mind, even if you are playing like the both staves and think like in a fugue of both things, you cannot really think at the same time of both things. Like your mind refocuses all the time on something that you want to point out or bring forward or focus on. Yeah. Otherwise, like it's really not. And then, as you are saying, it's a complete mindfuck when you're trying to connect like the two things which are by definition in contrast with one another.
Yeah, right? But I think it's just like, you know, when we started learning the accordionist kits, but also now when you approach a very complex score, you start by learning one hand and then the other, and then you put them together, right? And this is just a third player in that game that you have to incorporate. So it really is slowly adding this extra layer, and as you said, automatizing it, or kind of linking it to each other in a meaningful way, so that you don't work against yourself. And just like we can seemingly, you know, pull out one voice in polyphony, which is, you know, it's quite impressive, really, when we have only this one bellows. So the same way you can also focus on different things, although you play and speak or sing at the same time. But in my experience, it just takes a lot of time, and it's really frustrating at the beginning. But I think it's something you learn. You actually acquire a skill which you can then much more easily use later. It's kind of for fun tried when I had a rehearsal with a group the other day, and I just try it for fun. Is it, can I say something while I'm playing,
Mm-hmm.
just to see where is it at now? Because before I did this Goldberg piece, it was absolutely impossible. The minute I started to suggest something, I would just like either follow the exact rhythm of what I was playing, or I would just stop playing because I couldn't.
Or you say something, and in the meantime, you play something completely wrong, like on the instrument.
Absolutely, yeah.
Oh, definitely. Wow. No, it's really like one of those things that you might think that experimentation has to do with the instrument and the way you play the instrument, but actually, like, I think with the accordion, what we call, like what you were saying also in the interview for the Borealis Festival, like the extended techniques for us accordionists nowadays are normal techniques. Like there's really not one thing that you might say, oh wow, I never did that before. Like, and the experimentation starts, okay, we acquired this palette of tools and techniques that we can use. Now, how do we use them? And I think the experimentation here starts with ourselves, like us as the ones who deliver the techniques at the same time combining something from ourselves. Like it can be recitation, it can be singing, it can be, I don't know, tip tap dancing, I don't know, like whatever, but something that has to do not only with the instrument but with yourself as a human being and as a person. So yeah, Andreas, how do you see the level of accordionists, like when you were a student, and how is the level today?
I'm sure that the level is higher now than it was at like generally, because I think that's just that's the development in all instruments, and with especially with the improved connection and knowledge that everyone has about what's happening, and of course with the recording industry and the number of accordion repertoire or albums that are released, and you can listen to so much, and you can listen to so much fantastically well produced recordings that just pushes the level,
Definitely. Andres, how did you stay fit in the pandemic, and has it affected your motivation to now that everything is opening up, right? Now that we're slowly, well, some slowly, some not so slowly. I saw that you have lots of dates coming up. For some reason, my summer, like not to brag, but for some reason, my summer also got full of dates, which I'm very happy about.
Fantastic.
But after 1 year of being not very active, you need to redevelop the stamina to actually like kind of pull through entire recitals. So how did you stay motivated during that period?
Well, I've been tremendously lucky to have the PhD project, and to actually be, which is for the first time in my life, I've had this like full-time job, which is the PhD position or fellowship. And so I've actually had lots of things to work on. They haven't all been related to playing the accordion, but then like last spring, the lockdown there, I spent a lot of time writing kind of an essay / article about actually the Jennifer Walsh solo piece, Self-Care.
Okay.
And I've been doing a lot of other administrative work as part of the PhD, applying for money for the composers, booking or trying to book the performances and all this. But then I have also, although it's been mainly online on Zoom, I've spent a lot of effort developing the pieces and workshopping them and practicing them to, with the composers, or to play it for the composers online. So although also, I didn't have any proper performances live, I had a lot of things on my plate that I actually needed to do. So I was I didn't find a lack of motivation, luckily. But of course, it was kind of a setback when the planned premieres of the new pieces as in my PhD that got cancelled and all that. We've been through that, everybody. So but I think it kept me it kept the steam going, that I had this project, or still have it. And the agreements with the composers were all set, and we had these deadlines to work for. So yeah, but I'm curious now when the actual performances start happening, and of course then with Corona postponements and rescheduling, I also have. And I would say it's a bad planning now, but that's just impossible to avoid. But projects that collide over the summer and the autumn. So it's going to be a tough or an exciting, let's say, and energetic start to the new year.
Great. No, it's really great that all of the accordionists who I talked to, also on the podcast, all of them said that although, of course, unfortunately, all the performances got canceled and everything, they still had so much stuff to do that was, kind of piled up there. But you didn't really have the time or the mental space to deal with it. And when you are kind of forced to do that, then you start actually doing all of that work that needed to be done. And you're still in the loop. You're still going. You're still active and doing stuff. So yeah, no, it's really great.
I have to admit though that I thought, because I have a big pile of repertoire that I'd love to learn and play, but and never have time to, or not yet, to sit down and start learning. And I thought, now with the lockdown, I should just start learning, whatever, this and that, but without any specific end result, like a concert or recording of it. I had a hard time finding the motivation for that, I must admit. Just sitting down and learning repertoire for quote, no reason, unquote.
I completely agree. Same thing here. Like I had this folder in which I have all of the pieces that I would really love to play someday. And, like if somebody were to tell me, we need you to play this concert with this piece in like 3 months, I'll be sitting there immediately, like practicing this piece, because that gives me the motivation. But as you're saying, without an end goal and actually seeing like the actual results of this happening, like you're sitting there and thinking like, what's the point?
Yeah, it's not to say that the motivation for the music is of course there, but it's just when you don't have if you don't need to spend the time, then all of these other tasks that have been piling up, they suddenly just, there's always something you should do because because you're already past the deadline for that. If it could be an application or whatever, and then it just feels difficult to postpone that even longer to learn repertoire that you don't necessarily have a concert for yet.
Yeah, no, the priorities change. Because, which is fine, because as long as you have stuff to do, that keeps you active.
And as long as you have that folder with music that you really, really want to learn, that's the most important thing, really.
Yeah, I completely agree. Because the moment you stop and you say, I'm doing this, I don't know, for whatever reason, for the money, because I don't know what else to do with my life, like that doesn't make any sense in being
probably not worth it.
An artist. No, definitely. Like, no. Andreas, what would be your advice to the, I want to say young, but as you said, that makes me also feel old, and we are both not that old.
Well, that's kind of you.
Like let's say it like this. What would be your advice to a 15 or 16-year-old yourself? Like if you were to see your teenage self today, what your advice would be?
You mean in accordion terms?
Whatever. I mean, it can be accordion, it can be also like have a plan B, C, D.
Yeah, well, I think in terms of music, I would probably have said don't worry too much. But on the other hand, I know that the sort of the worry that I've had as a companion since forever, basically, about it, has been a tremendous driving force as well So I probably wouldn't advise myself to just, be completely careless about, thinking of the future and thinking about what, to be starting up projects, sort of, being this entrepreneur that basically we all have to be to make a career, or to sort of put together a life that functions, with all the different types of projects and activities that it is and can be part of it. Yeah, I'd probably say don't forget to enjoy it.
And that's very important, a very important advice, because at times I think for many of us, especially during study years, it feels kind of like a torture, and you're really considering, like, what am I doing here? Like, why am I sitting here for 6 hours in this room alone doing this?
But if, musically speaking, I would really say don't forget to enjoy and remember why you're doing it. Also when you go on stage. And, if you have problems with concert anxiety and all that, and you don't feel that you can ever enjoy, then that's where you should, put some effort. And then don't forget what is music about. It, if you think if the 6 hours of practicing becomes a purely technical torture, then where is the music? So don't forget that music is this tremendous communicating power that just creates so many fantastic experiences for both ourselves as musicians and hopefully also for the audience.
Yeah, that's such a precious advice, and also a precious thought to consider all the time, and remember why we're doing this. Because perhaps from a, let's call it, capitalistic point of view, we are not that productive for the society, but without us, musicians, music, art in general, like, the society would crumble. So
absolutely.
no, it's very important to remember, and thank you for sharing that. Andreas, is there something you would like to plug? Like, you have lots of amazing CDs which the listeners can find on your website. If you click on the description of this episode, you will find the links to Andreas's Vimeo account, to Andreas's website, and there you can find lots of information. But maybe there's something that you would really like to kind of plug and promote in the near future.
Well, in the near future, which might also be a new future, who knows? I'm looking very much forward to two things in particular. One is the next collaboration with Jennifer Walsh, which is a kind of concerto for Sinfonietta and myself. Yeah, it's she's working on it intensely now, and it's going to be fabulous.
I'm sure of it. I'm sure.
So that'll premiere in the middle of September at the Ultima Festival in Oslo. And right before that, like a week before, I'm doing a project with a fantastic Polish Baroque ensemble called Arte dei Suonatori, which I've been working on for a couple of years, but it's also been postponed and cancelled and all this. But finally, we have this little tour in Denmark going on where I get to perform 2 of Bach's harpsichord concerti with them.
Wow.
And that's also something that lies very close to my heart. So yeah, it's going to be a tremendous September, which I look forward to. I hope what the Bach should be broadcast in the Danish radio. So at some point I can hopefully link on social media to that.
Yeah. So if any of our listeners are living in Denmark, make sure to catch Andreas's performances. Which concerts are you doing? Which of the concerti by Bach?
The A major and the G minor.
Gorgeous. A major is my all-time favorite.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, I played it once with an orchestra here not here, in Italy. But yeah, absolutely gorgeous. Andreas, thanks again a lot for taking your time. Being on the podcast, it has been an immense pleasure, and I can't really wait to meet you in person and have a coffee together.
Likewise, and thank you so much for inviting me.
Thank you for listening to Everything Accordion. Tune in 2 weeks' time for another episode of the podcast. Future episodes will feature information about the different types of accordions, how they work, curiosities, as well as many prominent colleagues who will talk about their experiences, their projects, and their view on the accordion in the past, today, and in the future. If you liked this episode, feel free to share it with your friends, colleagues, and on social media. If you would like to support the show, you can become a supporter on Patreon. Just click on the link in the description of the episode, and it will direct you to my Patreon channel, where you can become a cool, awesome, or VIP level patron, or you can donate whichever amount you would like in exchange for exclusive content, polls, behind the scenes moments, music, concerts, and much more. Thank you again for listening.